You are going to love today's show. We've got Madeline Hardacre, who is a MD. She is board certified lifestyle medicine physician and OBGYN. She's an entrepreneur and she's an ultramarathoner who really shares her approach to mastering the middle years. So in this conversation, she discusses what she learned from doing a 50-mile ultramarathon and how you can apply those lessons to your own life. She talks about creating long-term behavior change and where people get in their own way. She shares the idea of setting a personal health vision and using that to identify where you are holding back. And she talks about what is functional medicine and how is it different from the type of medicine we normally think about. Now, this is a really fun conversation with a lot of knowledge dropped along the way. So give it a listen, share with friends, and if I could ask a favor of you, leave a quick review. Now, podcasts can sometimes be difficult to leave a review for, especially I find like with going on Apple Podcasts, you got to figure out where to go and all that. So I use a service called Love the Podcast. And if you go to www.lovethepodcast.com/midlife mastery, it will give you several options to choose from. And so it will connect you right with your favorite podcasting app, whether that's Apple, whether it's Google, and allow you to quickly leave a review. And those reviews are so important because first, it lets me know what you really enjoy about the show so I can keep improving it and making it even better. And because of algorithms and also just because people do read reviews, it helps others learn about the show. So more people can learn about and be inspired by the guests in creating a phenomenal midlife. And before we get started, I also wanted to add, if you have not, please go listen to the episode with John McDonald. Now, this episode was called Focusing on What You Can Control, and in less than 2 weeks has become the third most downloaded episode of Midlife Mastery. And in that episode, he shares what he does around the importance of focusing on what you can control and how do you do that. Using your comfort zone as a guide. You know, sometimes we use it as a fortress or even a prison. He uses it as a guide to figure out how to get better. Love that approach. He talks about using small experiments to continually improve. So not just overhauling your life, but making little tweaks all the time. And he really gets into talking about changing your mindset to change your life, how he did that and the difference it made for him. So please enjoy today's episode, share it with a friend, leave a review, and go make it a great day. Let's get started. Well, welcome to Midlife Mastery. This is, of course, Brock Edwards, and thank you for joining us today. So I have Dr. Madeline Hardacre, and she is with Women's Health Elevated. And actually, well, Madeline, one of the nice things is I'm not an expert in really anything. I'm a guy on the internet. You are an expert in a lot of stuff. So double board certified OBGYN and also lifestyle medicine. And I want to find out a little bit more about that. And you are also an ultramarathoner. Mm-hmm. Well, that covers a lot of ground right there, but I know that isn't everything. So how do you introduce yourself to people?
Oh my goodness. I was a practicing gynecologist for 20 years. I have always had this passion for a healthy lifestyle and pursued training in lifestyle medicine and ultimately became board certified in that, but really found that I just love helping women with just long-term behavior change to help their health. So that's kind of what led me to develop Women's Health Elevated. And I'm also a mom, wife, distance runner, and that really sums it up.
All right. Well, give yourself credit for the ultra distance because, running, when you say distance, for some of us, distance is, a couple miles. For some, it's less. But so you just did what, a 50-mile ultramarathon?
I did. That was my first 50-miler just a few days ago.
All right. That is, well, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm definitely not up to 50 miles. So, oh man, so many different things I want to talk to you about. So first off, just from doing a 50-mile, and for those of us who have never ran 50 miles, it's a little hard to get our heads around. What lessons are there that you take from that like a person could apply just to their daily life? There's still some great lessons from there, right?
Oh, absolutely. You know what? I mean, first of all, I think a beautiful lesson is just what led me to do that. And that is, I'd always been a distance runner and I'd always had this interest in doing something like that. But there was this looming fear involved. And, of just like how uncomfortable it would be, or what if I didn't succeed, this fear of failure. And a couple of years ago, I was really kind of.
Now, I do have to interrupt you right there, Madeline, because it is a true distance runner who will discuss running 50 miles as the fear of being uncomfortable. Not suffering, not pain, just, mild discomfort. Don't know if I want that. Anyway, sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. A couple of years ago, it was actually when I was doing my health coach certification. We went through this process in our class of developing our kind of overall vision of wellness for ourselves. And in the process of really exploring what that personal vision looked like to me, I realized that my vision involved trying to step outside of my comfort zone and not succumbing to that fear of failure. And so during this certification, when I created that vision of wellness, and it really involved like looking at my life and looking at, okay, where am I holding back because I'm scared? And immediately those longer distances were one of those things where it had always just been in my mind of something I probably could do. And yet I just never, ever took the step because I was fearful of it. And anyway, so I think just life lessons in general, like looking at what are those things on the outskirts of our comfort zone and identifying them and starting to kind of, have some fun with thoughts about those things.
I love that. Years and years and years ago, I'd always wanted to do a triathlon, and I never did because, well, my swimming style can best be described as controlled drowning. Like it's just not good. But it was like this epiphany, like, oh, I could take swim lessons. Like I could actually learn how to swim instead of just saying, well, I can't really swim. And I know that sounds really weird and stupid now, but at the moment, it was just like this light bulb moment is I was kind of doing this, something I always wanted to do and never did. And I always had this reason. It was just like, well, why don't I just go do it? Like,
right.
Yeah.
But isn't that amazing when that happens? When all of a sudden you realize, like, you have this like belief that's keeping you from doing something. And then all of a sudden you start questioning that belief and recognizing that you can completely change that thought.
Yeah. And so I love that takeaway of just something you wanted to do that you'd been holding back on. That just seems so powerful because I think we all have those things that we hold back on, or we kind of dismiss or downplay. We tell our friends or family, I don't really want to do it. We tell ourselves, I don't really want to do it. Or, I would, except, I'm married, I have children, I live in the city, I live in the country, I'm single, I have no kids. We all have our reasons why we can't do it. So you made the decision to, but there's a big difference between deciding to do something and actually following through. So what can we take, that commitment? Deciding is one thing, and deciding is very important, but the commitment to actually follow through. So what did you learn on the way to that level of commitment? Because that's a different level of commitment than even doing a marathon, which is a huge commitment.
I mean, first of all, and this is something that I work with my patients and clients on a lot, but just the importance and power of knowing like that vision of what you want and having it really clear in your mind. Like it was, it was something, like I said, I had it in my mind, but then when you start like doing things like putting it on paper and telling people that you're going to do it, like there's a whole like level of discomfort with just like kind of putting it out there in the world. And then, but I think that's an important step, because then all of a sudden you're like really like starting to visualize what you want. And I think that's what really got me through those hard days or hard weeks of training, is because I so clearly knew what I wanted to accomplish that when it felt really difficult, I could always pull up that vision very easily of, and knowing people talk about knowing your why, but really understanding your why and what it is you're trying to achieve, and making like just developing incredible clarity around it. So it's not some wishy-washy vague thing that you're trying to accomplish. Like it's exactly what it is.
It's interesting how just writing something down is kind of magical in that we think we have it in our head, but then when we have to articulate it,
Right.
it just becomes very different.
Right.
And what does it look like? And what is the plan? And how is this going to happen? And what do I actually want to accomplish with it? And just all those things. So,
and I think that's what was helpful with just like with it being a race with a specific date and a specific distance. Like it was very clear what I was working on.
Now, did you work with a coach when you did that, or?
No. I have a good friend who has run many of them. And so we trained together on the weekend. She lives about an hour away, but we would train together on the weekends. And I also trained my 22-year-old son did it as well. So that was kind of a whole another, part of the experience was that, he beat me by 5 full hours, but
you trained him well.
Yeah, he did the race as well.
Well, that's really cool. All right, I'm going to shift gears a little bit here.
Yeah, sure.
And because you mentioned lifestyle medicine, and I think I know what that is. And it's nothing that I thought you could get board certified for. So I'm really, really curious about it. And so just like I say, I think I know, but I get into trouble when I assume things. So tell me what it is. How do you describe it to the layperson?
You know what? And you're not alone in not having a clear understanding of it, because it is a very new specialty. In fact, 2017 was the first year, I believe, that they offered a board exam in it. And then I became certified in 2019. So it is new. It is what it entails is essentially 6 pillars that have been defined as kind of the foundations for disease prevention, chronic disease prevention and reversal. And those are nutrition, physical activity, stress management, sleep optimization, helping people develop like a good support system, and then avoidance of toxins such as alcohol and tobacco and drug use. So using those 6 pillars to help people either prevent chronic disease or reverse chronic disease. And it's all very evidence-based.
I really, really like that, because that captures everything that I've always not liked about our healthcare system.
Yeah.
And so for those who aren't aware, when you mentioned like nutrition and sleep optimization and stress management, when you were just working on your medical degree, how much time did you spend studying those subjects?
I think people would be really surprised at how little physicians are trained in those things. I mean, and I think it's getting better. And with this specialty of lifestyle medicine, there are like medical school lifestyle medicine interest groups, and you're starting to see medical students who are kind of pursuing their own education in these topics. But when I I graduated from, I'm going to show my age here, but I graduated from medical school in 96. And we had very, very little education on nutrition. And I don't like sleep. I don't remember any education on that. I probably had some kind. Just in general, those topics were really not covered, but yet such an important part of our health. So it's crazy.
It's interesting because, my understanding, and this is a very much a layman's understanding, I'm not even remotely close to being a doctor, is so many of our diseases prevalent today are caused by lifestyle, or at least exacerbated by lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And it's always baffled me a little bit that most of medicine seems aimed at treating the symptoms that the lifestyle caused, but not actually working with the lifestyle to prevent that disease. So anyway, I didn't know that was an actual thing. And I'm so excited to discover that there are actually doctors out there focused on lifestyle medicine. That is fantastic.
And you know what's really fun about it is, like, for me, like when I attend the conferences, then it's physicians and other healthcare providers from literally like all specialties, which is a lot of fun. So to see, you have your OBGYNs, you have your primary care doctors, you have your cardiologists, your endocrinologists, your nephrologists, like all of these specialists coming together, and all with the focus of understanding how lifestyle affects their particular specialty. So
nice.
It's so much fun.
That is really, really exciting. As an ongoing solution, I love the focus on the lifestyle first. So anyway, but what can we take from that knowledge? Because you do a program called Mastering the Middle Years. And so I know that's focused around group coaching, but what lessons can we take from that? I mean, I suspect anyone listening to this show is going to want to master their middle years. I mean, that's what the show is about. I'm trying to figure out how to do it.
Right.
The genesis behind the show was me reaching middle age and feeling like I kind of had life figured out, and realizing that I don't have my midlife figured out. Like, how do I approach it? What's different? What's not different? And also with that is the sense of mortality that I didn't have when I was 25. And, working on personal development when you're 25 is way different than working on it when you're 50 plus, I think, in my mind anyway. I've got some deadlines now that I didn't have before.
Exactly.
And I'm also at this age feeling the cumulative effects of lifestyle injuries, things that, the past 50 years are catching up with me, and they're catching up with all of us. So I like the idea. Well, how do we master it? So what are some key things that we should work on to really master the middle years?
First of all, I think recognizing essentially what you just said, but like, if we want a long, healthy, active life, then now is the time where we really have to become intentional about our health. Like, we can't, there are times earlier in our life where we could kind of be a little sloppy with it and get by, and we can't do that anymore. So the decisions we're making now are really what are going to determine the rest of our journey. And so it's really imperative that we develop that intentionality behind what we're doing. And so my program, that's one of the things we discuss is just, what does that look like for you? And, I've learned some good lessons in doing this, in that I always kind of assumed everybody wanted a long, healthy, active life. And I've learned that not everybody does. So, but for those of us who do, then we have to be developing that intention. The other thing is, I think, just, it kind of gets back to that vision of what we want, like really knowing what we want out of the rest of our life. What do we want the second half of our life to look like? And starting to, define that and set some specific goals with that. And the other thing, you brought up injuries and things like that, is developing a focus on what we are able to do, not a focus on what we aren't able to do. And I think that's one of the things that I see frequently when I'm working with patients or clients is kind of a focus on, maybe prior athletic injuries or things like that are keeping them from doing things. And there's a lot of focus on what they can't do. And when we can shift that focus to all of the things that they are able to do with their life, then they really kind of develop a new direction and a new energy about it.
So do you tend to work with the people that show up for your programs, and maybe, everyone's different, but I'm just wondering, do they tend to be people who, like you, have always had a focus on health and fitness and are just looking to ramp it up? Is it people who have, gotten sidetracked as life went on and now kind of want to get back on track, regain maybe what they had? Or is it people who have never really thought about it and now hit midlife and are going, oh, I've got to do something?
I would say most of the people I work with fall into one of two kind of general categories. One is very much like me, where they have really been very focused on their health and their lifestyle, but they get into, particularly for women, get into this kind of menopausal age range, and there are some physiologic changes that we simply can't avoid and that are happening, and their body's changing, and essentially, like, all the tools they have been so accustomed to working, like, all of a sudden aren't working anymore. And so, it might be just something simple like, an extra 10 pounds on the scale or something, but it's enough to get them really frustrated and saying, you know what, okay, let me kind of regroup and work with somebody on this. And so that's a lot of the women I see. But then the other subset is women that have maybe spent their life up to this point really kind of focused on taking care of everybody else in their life. So, they've been, mom, wife, career, maybe elderly parents, like their whole focus has been on everybody else. And then now they actually, maybe their kids are out of the house now and they actually have some time to put toward themselves, but are kind of at a loss as to how to do it, which is just a hard, like, to all of a sudden, like, provide good self-care when you've not done it for 20 or 30 years is just a hard switch to make. And so helping them through that process is kind of another focus of the program. And we have a lot of fun with that.
Do they show up nervous or do they show up excited?
They seem to show up excited. Like, they're excited to have, like, my groups are small. So it's like 5 women at a time. And I think that they tend to be just excited that they're coming into an environment where they know they're going to get some support. They know they're going to be with other people kind of in a similar situation, and just to kind of feel like some hands on their back to start making some changes. I seem to be excited.
Excellent. Well, I mean, and I asked just because that's a big change. We were talking about just writing something down on paper. Well, voicing it out into the world, actually making the phone call or, clicking on the internet link or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that's real. That's no longer just this vague thought.
Well, and it's funny because I actually addressed that, like, right at the very beginning, about anticipating the discomfort, knowing that they're going to feel it. Like, because as soon as they start, like, actually, vocalizing what they want to change in their life, then it is going to feel uncomfortable, because our brain likes just really reflexive actions. Like, our brain wants to just keep us comfortable in that little cave and just doing the same thing every day. And, you are going to have that feeling of, oh my goodness, this, like, is this a good idea or not? Maybe it's not. Like, so I just tell them straight up to anticipate it. Like, it's just going to be part of it.
Yeah, no, that's good, because, one of the things we find is that people get buyer's remorse even over stuff they're excited about. Life decisions, like, we buy a car we're in love with, we buy a house that's just the house we've been looking for. We still have that moment of, what have I done?
Right. And it's that like, it's the step of, like, actually committing to something. Like, like, when you commit, it all of a sudden, there's neural pathways there that give us kind of an agitated feeling with that step.
And I think it's helpful for me anyway to acknowledge that it's going to be difficult. And I'm doing a half marathon here in a few days, so nowhere close to an ultra, and I won't be describing it as uncomfortable. I will have other words for it. But actually, there's so much freedom in that. I've done 1 or 2 before, and someone told me, this is actually going to be miserable.
Mhm.
And it wasn't like in a defeatist way. It was just like the acknowledgement of, yeah, it's going to be hard. And for me, that was so freeing because if I had gone into it thinking, oh, this should be easy. Why isn't it easy?
Right.
This person running next to me, they make it look easy. Why am I suffering? That's terrible. I mean, it's hard for the brain.
Mhm.
But if I'm able to go like, oh, it really hurts right now because it's supposed to. Okay,
Right.
I can deal with that.
Exactly. It's all like what our brain, like our brain takes that discomfort and like wants to make it mean something. Like it wants it to make it mean like it's a bad idea. Like and then when you start trying to kind of shake up that thought and saying, "Oh, I'm uncomfortable, but it's because I'm supposed to be uncomfortable,
Right.
not because I like this is a bad idea."
Yeah. Yeah. And like I say, that to
Mhm.
me is just so freeing to have that. So I'm sure they appreciate the forewarning of
Yes. The
um
other thing, when you talking about the half marathon, the other like fun thing, you'll have to see if you experience this, but the like you'll have those times with longer runs where like you think, oh my gosh, this totally sucks. This is miserable. I don't know that I can keep doing this. And literally 30 seconds later, you're totally fine. Like and and just when you start recognizing that you will have those moments where it feels totally miserable, but then you recognize that it is going to go away and you're going to, it's kind of an interesting thing that our brain does.
definitely. Yeah. In fact, I experienced that the other night on a run, much shorter run, but just
Mhm.
kind of that like feeling like, oh man, I'm just tired. I'll just walk for a bit. And I don't remember why I was like trying to wait out the song I was listening to or something. And next thing I know, the run's over, it just, that was great. It never got worse. So I just kept going and that was fine.
Exactly.
And for those listening who aren't runners, all this applies back to life and any kind of self-development we're talking about, it's uncomfortable. It's probably going to be different because, I mean, you used a phrase at the beginning. You said long-term behavior change.
Mhm.
And I really like that term because, well, I guess I feel myself at this age, like I mentioned, of suffering the consequences of long-term behavior. Just
Mhm.
habits I got into, some support me, some didn't. And
Mhm.
when I was 20, 30, even 40, wasn't that big of a deal. Now I'm
Mhm.
starting to feel some of the effects, some of the consequences a little bit more. And so if long-term behavior change were simple, we wouldn't be talking about it right now. And so, I mean, we just all go do it, right? And wouldn't be a problem. Where do we tend to get in our own way around true behavior change?
Oh. You know what? I mean, the number one thing that comes to my mind is people have a tendency to develop very all or none thinking with changing a behavior. And they're looking for or expecting a level of perfection with changing a behavior. And I mean, just things are not all or not like, I mean, that's what really like gets in our own way when we take on that mentality with something when we're trying to do something. And my patients will laugh at me because I'll be like, you know what, I like we'll talk about a healthy diet or something and I'm like, but I want B+ work.
Hmm.
Like I don't want I like when people go all in, I'm just like, oh no, like because because like it's not sustainable to go from like to 0 to 60 and not do any of the steps in between. So really like I think that's one of the big places where people get themselves into trouble is they set just these big goals and want to do it perfectly. And I always ask the question of like, what would you do in your life right now if doing B+ work was okay? Like, what would you try? What would you challenge yourself with? And it really opens their eyes to a lot of fun things when they look at it that way.
That is a great way to look at it because I am a very much pro level all or nothing person. And so I get in those traps where
Uh-huh.
I can I can do massive behavior change and it works really, really well until it doesn't.
Right.
And then as soon as I'm off track for whatever reason, and life happens, so I know I will be off track at some point. Something will push me out of my habit or my pattern, but that's very freeing to focus on, like, B+ level. I love that. And my wife is the opposite. She is very good at kind of the middle of the road behavior. Middle of the road's not the right term. Moderation.
Sure.
Yeah, she's good at the moderation. I'm much more good at this extreme or that extreme. Sometimes simultaneously. I'm very good at it. But that, for those of us wired that way, that is very freeing. I used to work with a guy who talked about doing experiments, and that if you have any perfectionist tendencies in you, that is very freeing to just say, I'm not changing my entire life. This is, I'm trying something. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, I'll go try something else. Well,
because people kind of hold themselves back because they think, like, if they try something, then they've got to, like, go all in. But I mean, particularly like with like a healthier diet or something, like, but when they really explore, like, what could they do that maybe wasn't perfect, but is much better than it is right now, then, they can actually start moving forward than being stuck in this fear of trying something and failing because they want something perfect. They're always good. There are going to be birthday parties. There's going to be holidays. And we have to figure out how to experience those things, but not get completely derailed by them, and be able to experience it and then go back to our healthier way of eating or back to our exercise routine, or not make the fact that we had a day of celebration mean that something about us, that we're a failure, or we clearly can't do this. We make it mean all kinds of things in our head that then that's what really derails us.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, taking it to the identity level of, this says X about me, versus, yeah, I had a piece of cake because it was the polite thing to do.
Right. Exactly. Just like, have a piece of cake. Don't make it mean something. Like, that's something that I work with people a lot on, because it is a struggle, because they have the piece of cake and then they spend, 24, 48 hours or longer then feeling guilty and having all kinds of other emotions about it.
Well, and so for those of us who are midlife, we've had some successes. We've probably had some failures too. And what can people do? Is there a way, a technique, an approach to get beyond the idea of, well, that just doesn't work for me? Like, I tried that in the past, and, maybe it works for other people, but not for me.
When I work with people, I feel like there's a fine balance there, because I think that it's important to learn, like, there's no cookie cutter approach, I don't think, for, like, I feel like there's all kinds of different ways to be a healthier version of yourself. There's not a cookie cutter approach. We have to learn, but through kind of experimentation, of what works for us and what doesn't. But I think you have to evaluate, if you're saying, well, that just doesn't work for me, is that thought, though, getting you the results you want, or is it not? Like, are you thinking that, but then you're really stuck in an undesirable result? Because if you're not getting the result you want, then I would go back to that belief of, this isn't working for me, and start exploring, like, is that really true? Like, or is there a different way to look at this? Or is there a different way I could experiment with that concept? Like, I get that actually a lot with, I have a perfect example for this, because in Mastering the Middle Years, we do some goal setting. And I have had a few times women come into the program and say, goals don't work for me. Like, it doesn't work. And I said, well, let's really explore this idea, because we don't know how you did it in the past. Let's look at how I teach goal setting. Let's keep an open mind and, have maybe do it a different way, or not just be so concrete that they don't work.
What do people typically tend to find? Like, is that just an excuse that they've been giving themselves, and out that they've been giving themselves? Or is it just the way they approached it? Well, they just didn't approach it in a way that worked well for them, or...
Right. And so for like, if you use the example of goals, what I have found in talking to them is in the past, it has kind of come back to the all or none mentality and things like that of, yeah, they've set goals, but they've set like really big goals without much structure in between here and there. And so they end up thinking, well, setting a goal doesn't work for me, versus starting with something really tiny and doable, and where you have some confidence that you can do it, and you do it, and then continue to gain that confidence. If you start with something just very small, very attainable, very relevant to the overall picture, and you actually make it happen, then you get a little confidence, you go a little bigger, and there's a whole kind of structure in there to reach that bigger goal. But when you just go from here to there, it's a lot of times, people think it just doesn't work.
Well, we've covered a lot here today, Madeline. So let me ask, where can people find you?
Yeah, Women's Health Elevated. So I have a website, womenshealthelevated.com. I'm on Instagram and Facebook, both with Women's Health Elevated. I think that's pretty much it.
All right. Well, that's plenty of places, actually. Website and 2 social media outlets that they ought to be able to track you down.
I opened a TikTok account, but my teenage kids are like, oh my God, Mom. So there's nothing there.
Yes, I have not, which is funny. And kids are different, because my daughter would be all for something like that. And I think my son would roll his eyes. So
right. Yeah, my daughter was not excited.
Well, so what questions haven't I asked you? As we wrap up here, are there any common questions that you get that we haven't covered?
Oh my goodness. We did touch on this, but I would love to just reiterate the importance of, so many people kind of have have this belief that their genetics are going to define who they are as far as chronic disease risk and their overall health. And, okay, well, my, mother is in a, memory care facility, so that's just where I'm going to end up. Or, my father, died young of heart disease, so that's just where I'm going to end up. And it's really our lifestyle that is going to play a role. Our genes certainly play a role, but the lifestyle is what is really going to affect your, help you gain that long, healthy, active life that you want. And so I just can't reiterate that enough. People will say that, your genes or your genetics are kind of what load the gun, but it's your lifestyle that pulls the trigger. And it's so true. Like, you get a good, healthy lifestyle going, and it can make such a difference.
Well, so, and you'd mentioned when we were talking about lifestyle medicine, there were 6 pillars. So, I know this, when we're talking about lifestyle, we're talking about a lot, but what is one thing people could do right away that would, get them down the right path? Like, where do you recommend people start with something simple? What's an easy thing?
A simple thing. What? One of the first things I always go to is a good night's sleep. And people are always surprised that that's like where I want them to start. But I feel like the physical activity, the ability to manage a stressful day, the ability to eat a healthy meal, all of those things are so much easier if you have good quality sleep on board. And if you're trying to make all these changes in your lifestyle, but you're not sleeping well, it's like you are swimming upstream. You're fighting against a current there.
So where do we start with getting a better night's sleep? It's one of those things that sounds so easy, and yet obviously we're not doing it, so it's not easy.
Right. You know what? I think like a good first step I tell people to do is to develop a really good, structured, consistent bedtime routine. And when I say that, I mean starting like 2 hours before your actual bedtime and being consistent night after night with that routine and with the time that you're going to bed, and not varying it on weekends, really trying to be very consistent. But it means things like turning the electronics off, not having the blue light waves that are going to interfere with our melatonin secretion, which is our like sleep hormone. But so turning the electronics off, dimming the lights, not doing anything like, scrolling on Facebook or doing any of those things just stimulate our minds and can get us all wired in the wrong direction when we're wanting to go to sleep. So eliminating those things, thinking of things that really are calming. So, dimming the lights, nice music, or reading a paper book, or stretching, yoga, meditation. There's all kinds of things, but creating a consistency in that hour to 2 hours before bed and doing it night after night. And then the other thing, avoiding alcohol soon before bed, and definitely caffeine in the afternoon, evening hours. But if you start doing those things, that right there, and it can make such a huge difference.
All right. Excellent. So thank you very much, Madeline, for being on today and for sharing your wisdom and your experience. And congrats again on the Ultra. That is awesome.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.